Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of. Sorry, that's the wrong intro. But hello, everyone. Welcome to another discussion of the Thousandfold Thought, which is the third book in the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Baker. Um, we are reading this series about 100 pages every week and meeting weekly to discuss those 100 pages. Today, we're going to be discussing chapters 4 through 9 of the Thousandfold Thought, and next week will be how many other chapters gets us to 100 pages next. I think that's up to chapter 14. If you'd like to join us for these discussions, either here in this discussion group or on the Page Chewing Forum, just for textual discussions, come check out the Page Chewing Forum. With me, I have the usual group of people that we get to discuss this book with. Carl, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Yeah, I am Carl D. Albert, first time reader of this trilogy, having a great time. I'm very much enjoying seeing things kind of coming together here towards the end of it all.
Nice. I thought Mike froze for a second there. We've been having a lot of technical
I'm
issues
Dan.
today. Mike.
I've read these books before.
My name is Mike. I've been,
and I guess
this is my first time reading
here,
the series.
For now, I'm
really
the
been
one
enjoying it.
that has
if you
future
can say
knowledge,
that.
so I'll try to.
But happy
to myself.
to discuss these chapters with you today.
Yes, I can hear it.
Is Steve back? Can we
Can
hear
you-
him? Yes!
Oh, yes.
Excellent.
Jeez.
It's a big win, listeners.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure everyone's thrilled.
Oh, yes, Steve. We're doing introduction, so you came exactly at the right time.
Oh, cool. I'm Steve, and you can find me on pagechewing.com and all the various page chewing podcasts and on Varsha's channel and
Yes.
podcast and speculative speculations.
Yes,
Yes.
all of those.
All of those.
Cool. I was telling the group earlier that these 5 chapters have been my favorite so far in the series. So, what do all of you think?
Okay.
What are some high-level impressions?
I'm kind of surprised they're your favorite. Not that they were bad. I'm curious what made them your favorite.
Many things. The chapters with Confess and Nair, I think the internal monologues, there were a lot of internal monologues in these chapters, and I think after Malazan, that's kind of my jam. And Confess and Nair, even Confess, like he's an arrogant, self-centered ass, but everything he thinks to himself, I don't agree with them, but I loved reading through them and thinking about them, I guess. And sometimes when he has a point, I'm like, yeah, that thing I have to grapple with, where I agree with people I don't like. And and same with Nair, and we lost Steve again for a bit. Okay, he's back. With Nair, I think I'm forgetting, for all that I highlighted, what the high level aspects were that they were thinking so much about, but I really enjoyed reading all of his musings about what's going on. And I think and then when we got to the part, Akamian and Esmenet really turned around for me, like that. Akamian accepting feeling better about losing Esmenet to Kellis, realizing that maybe he didn't do as much for her as he could have, perhaps, that how she's changed with Kellis, and Esmenet realizing that
Really?
what Akamian's going through, like the conclusion of that, with her going to Akamian and saying, "I wanted to tell you that you are strong." I loved that whole
No, I'm just
them getting
saying
to
that,
understand each other a bit
to
more,
me,
and
even
all of
that
the
part is very
thought
painful
process
to
that
read, like
went
that whole
into that as
relationship.
they
Because it does
grappled with
feel
that.
like,
So
yeah, what you said
yeah,
is
I
true,
highlighted a
but it
lot.
also feels like
And
deep down they're
Dan
not
saying
really,
really in that
he still
menacing
wants
way,
her,
which means
obviously. He's
that
still, and
it's
she's still
probably going
feeling
to change around
manipulated
again,
by
knowing the
Kellis,
series.
right?
Mm, yeah, yeah,
It's
yes.
bittersweet. It's
Hmm.
definitely bittersweet. I will say I think I'm always pleased when we get these very heartfelt scenes and storylines and moments. It's something that you hear a lot of about the darkness in this series, understandably, like reasonably, because there is a lot of it, a lot of violence, a lot of just horrible things happening. But it really helps humanize the characters and ground the story. I feel like when you get
Mhm.
just so profoundly, emotional and human and intimate moments. And I am right there with you, Varsha, that I really enjoyed that. I found it incredibly moving. It was troubling. It definitely left me upset, but also pleased, because it is nice that like someone sees a Camion for what he endures. And I actually think in some ways Esmenet helped me feel even more of what Encamion, like, 'cause it's one thing to kind of see it from his perspective, and another thing to have like someone reinforce it and be like, no, this is really horrible, and that it was done in such an interesting way that it was from her reading stories, these
Yeah.
epics, the sagas, right? That is such a unique. I don't know if I've ever read anything like that before. Of someone like reading a story in a story and learning empathy, or like a deeper level of empathy through it. It was very meta and very well done, just all around. And that was probably the highlight for me, just because I did not expect it at all. And also kind of goes to show that Akamian was an idiot for not teaching her to read, because
Mm.
this could have helped him
Yeah.
so much, helped their relationship so much, like years ago. But that's their
Yeah.
flaws at work, right? And yeah, I'm with you. Confis is such a rich character that he's both like so smart and also so stupid at the same time. He's just so narcissistic and has such giant blind spots that you can't help but think he's a moron, but he actually is like also a genius.
Yeah.
It's bizarre to read. And I keep expecting him to just completely lose, but somehow he keeps managing to squeak his way out,
Mm.
which is fun. And Nair, because Nair is like a force of nature, so I kind of expect Nair to just like find a way through it all. But Confis, again, just because he has this like slight like loser aspect to him, but he always manages to make it through. He is just a fantastic character.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this bit, even though he knew the man simply flattered him, Confess decided that he agreed. So he's just deciding to not think about anything and just like, I'll make the world as I please, and I will be at the center of it. Yeah, I think these chapters brought a lot of
Mhm.
depth to all of our characters. And yes, I'm vaguely on the periphery, terrified for what will happen to Esmenet when Kellis shows his Kellis colors to Esmenet, if and when that comes about. But in terms of like everything that I was dissatisfied with at the end of the last set of chapters with regards to Akamian and Esmenet, how they were interacting with each other. I think Akamian, yeah, even him to a certain extent, I think he didn't get out of that um, she's a whore mentality,
Mm.
but he seems to have moved on from that. They've both grown up so much in this, and we got a lot more depth into Nair and conflict. Like Nair is I think our resident philosopher. He has a lot of. I think he's our window into Kellis to a certain extent.
So I want to give Mike a moment to talk, but just before we do, two things. I don't think Akamian has grown up at all since the torture. I think he's just distanced from,
Mm,
like, I think the emotions have sort of settled down.
mm,
Like, Esmenet, I feel like, has actually grown in these chapters, but I don't know that I feel like Akamian necessarily has. I feel like he's still the same person he was since the torture. Like, the torture clearly changed him, and then seeing Esmenet is with Kellis changed him. But I just feel like he's sort of more emotionally distanced, like time heals all wounds. And not that the wounds are healed, but that they're not so raw as they were. And the second thing, which we can talk about in lots of detail, I'm sure. Did you guys read this the same way I did, that Nair is like learning to cut himself off from the darkness that comes before? Like, that's what he's actively doing, that he's going outside and like the same things that Kellis is described as doing, Nair is doing, just kind of finding himself instinctively.
I think that is true. And also I think Confis to a certain extent, maybe he's a more what's that called? Lobotomy? A lobotomized version of the logos. Because he's trying to manipulate things the same way that Kellis seems to be, except he's not very good at it, but then he's good at it. Like he made me think a lot about Kellis in this section, maybe because of his lack of concern for the norms, right? He doesn't care about the religion. He doesn't care about the. Um, he tells the dude to not bow to him anymore. He's like, "Yeah, you can look me in the eye. I have no problem with that." So he's not one to set store by tradition and ritual, and that feels like cutting off a lot of the things that normal people set store by, and the lack of which allows Kellis to be as objective as he is, right? So I guess Nair and Confis are interesting because they're both semi Dunian sort of like. My point is Confis does not have a lot of what might constitute said darkness, and Nair is getting rid of it himself and realizing that too. So sorry, Mike, you go now.
No, I wouldn't challenge too much of what anybody said. I agree with you. I did have a different interpretation of Nair. I thought he seems to be going completely mad.
Well, I agree with that. I want to say
what has maybe allowed him to welcome in his relationship with the consult, which I found the most fascinating part of the whole 5 chapters or so, the last 100 pages or so. I wrote down a lot of notes like what the hell is going on here, because it slowly builds. We kind of knew from, I think, the first section that we read that he was starting to see the synthes. And at first I was like, oh, he's dreaming, but no, I don't think. Yeah, no, he wasn't. And so it's just jarring. But I hope to talk about that a little bit more. But one thing I wanted to say about Confis, which I thought was really interesting, and I'm not sure how much he himself had to do with it, but the what is it? The Sake sorcerer Kemen Ketri is like, I have been waiting to be wielded, essentially. So he's kind of been. So we haven't heard much from that character, and I thought it was interesting. I think there was a point made that there, the Sake school is the only one that's like associated with, like a state or one of these fiefdoms or what have you. So I'm very curious. That's quite ominous. But then the other aspect that I also felt really, apart from what you all had discussed, but the fact that Akamian is continuing to teach Kellis all of his all of the gnosis, and even how Kellis manipulated Akamian. I don't know, or yes, yeah, right. It was tapping into Saswatha. I don't know how he did that. It was like he learned hypnosis or what have you. But there's just a lot. There was just a few other things that I noted that really I was like, oh wow. It's kind of, those are two things that are kind of in the background, and I'm curious how that'll play out. But I agree that I think, you know, the relationship with Esmenet, and I mean, I wrote this down. She, in chapter 6, she traveled in her black palanquin with a luxurious litter of 16 slaves. And she is now like the second most powerful after Kellis. So she's like really, you know, gone full circle here, the complete other side of the spectrum, where she was really considered, you know, very low status, if you will, in their terms of Janan or whatever. And there was a section where they said she has kind of completely, or that has been rewritten for her. So she is really coming, as we talked about the last time, but it's even more like people are bowing to her that are very high up, like Proyas and all of these others. So it's really there's just a lot of tension building. Just so it's just all around. So that's what I had mentioned before we started recording. You know, it's just I feel my head is spinning a little bit, so I can't say this is my favorite, but there is really just I'm impressed with what Baker is doing. In addition, there's also a lot of exposition. There's a lot of info dump that is I don't mind. I have some trouble following it, but it's really a head scratcher section here. So I'm anxious to see how it plans out.
Kind of surprised to hear everyone's feedback, because the way that I saw Kamian's reaction to Esmenet was more of almost like jealousy, that he wanted to be the one, like kind of like he didn't see her value in a way, like he took her for granted. And now that she has this position of power, now that Kellis has brought out these other things in her, and she's starting to gain power and gain knowledge and respect, kind of took it as it's almost like he's a little bit jealous it's not him in that position, and not that he wanted to be with Kellis, but he didn't have that position of power.
I feel if it's true,
and
but I
kind of like he wanted to be the one to bring that out in her.
But Kellis
not
is so much more like he's
that
like a
he
prophet.
regrets not.
So he's like,
not.
Of course I couldn't do it.
It's
Like,
more of
okay,
like a selfish
she's with him. It's like he's so much more than me.
At least,
so he just
so
sort of
I'm a little
accepts
bit
it because
interesting
of that. I feel
you everyone else's reaction to it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I feel what Steve says was that Kamian wanted to be the one to bring.
I'm curious.
Full potential out.
I didn't get the impression at
Not
all
being Kellis'
that
position,
Akamian would
right?
like to
He just
trade
wanted
places with Kellis in any way, even if it means that he'd get Esmenet back. But yeah, I'm wondering if I missed something. Do you?
Yeah, but I think that just shows how ingrained like the patriarchy is in this world. It's like he never even thought about it. But now that it is there, he's like, yeah, obviously she can, and obviously,
like he wanted credit for it.
But
he wanted to be the one to do
remotely about it.
Or so
like,
she would be as grateful to him
right?
as she seems to be to Kellis for doing that.
Oh,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Didn't yeah, he didn't have a problem leaving time after time and
Right.
going off on his little missions and leaving her behind after he told her he wouldn't. So I think he sees her differently now that he sees what she's capable of, or
Yeah, I think your take on it, Steve, is a good one. I would agree with you. It's a kind of like a role reversal in some ways. There was, what about the one section in there I thought was kind of interesting where, I think it was was it before he kissed her or whatever? And he's like, I want to murder Kellis. It's like, he blurts it out, and then later on it's like, yeah, everybody knows, and they're not going to do anything about it. And I just found that to be, I thought that was going to be really bad for him. But I think what Kellis is able to do is he is able to change kind of the social norms and mores that exist, and show people like, all of these other things are possible, which is, I find it to be very striking that people would just kind of, I know it's because of who he is and what he's able to do. But he's kind of showing,
well, because
I guess, what
Kellis
the society could be. I don't
any
know. There's some
cultural
commentary on
tradition,
that in here somewhere. I'm not
doing
a sociologist or anything,
goals,
but
right?
I have a feeling that is what Baker is doing a little bit. I think with him giving the lecture on what was it, feminism, and to a certain extent. Yeah, go ahead. Right.
You're looking for trouble.
Exactly. Yeah, I find that really interesting, because that if you we can't necessarily, it's difficult to try to judge how the values that may exist in I don't know if this is a 15th century equivalent or who knows. But those are the, I do think about that a bit.
I mean, it's
so he's basically he's able to win hearts and minds. However, except for the men that are dutiful to Confis, which I think that was kind of surprising that there was, I don't know how many, but it was a fair number that still wanted to stay with him. So that shows that he hasn't, I guess he doesn't have full control over everybody.
Yeah. I think the way I read that, Steve, why I came to a different conclusion about the Akamian feeling about Esmenet. The way I read this was that he's come to the realization that he was insufficient, or he did not bring out the best of her in their relationship together, which is, yeah, I think it was more that he felt like he didn't do a good job then, than that he wished he could redo things, or that he had done those things for her. Like, even if that has, I forget if that's a thought that he did have, that he wished he had done better, which I don't think he explicitly came out and thought. He just was realizing all the ways in which he was insufficient. Like, he concludes with, I failed her, he realized, right? So it's more that I think he's analyzing what Kellis did for her that he did not do, and why she seems to be a better person now um, than she used to be with him, or that he didn't bring out the best in her, which for me is a realization that, this person could have been so much more, and I sort of restricted them, or I didn't see them for more than, like, they were bound by my perceptions of them. So that realization for him, I think, is important. I didn't read that as envy, just more self-realization. Maybe that's where we're differing in our conclusions.
Yeah, like Dan mentioned, I think the how deeply rooted the patriarchy is in this series, and that's part of it, is it never crossed his mind to think that she's capable of being more.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
Okay, I have been looking desperately to try to find the because I think this is really important, and I got interesting reactions from the guys who read it before, so I don't think I'm misreading this. That I'm with you, Mike. Nair is going insane. I mean, Nair's been insane for a while. Arguably, he's always been insane. But I'm telling you, he's having some. He's not perfect at it, but he's learning like the logos without being taught it. Like one of the first things is on page 105 in the paperback is he towards the bottom, there were two pasts. Nair understood that now. There's the past that men remembered, and there was the past that determined. And rarely, if ever, were they the same. All men stood in thrall of the latter, and knowing this made them insane. So they're beginning to identify the darkness that comes before. And then on page 158, he cackled aloud when the revelation struck. And for a moment, the world itself wobbled. A sense of power suffused him, so intense it seemed something other might snap from his frame, that throwing out his arms, he could shear Jokta's walls from their foundations. Cast into the horizon, no reason bound him, nothing, no scruple, no instinct, no habit, no calculation, no hate. He stood beyond origin or outcome. He stood nowhere. And his men, are asking him, what amuses you? And he thinks that I once cared for my life. Like he's separating himself from everything. He's wondering, like, why are people doing the things they're doing? And he's coming to these realizations that it's all bullshit, and that, their opinions, their perspectives all come from, where they stand in their pasts. And that he, in that moment, it doesn't last clearly, but he is finding these moments where, to me, that section read distinctly as him embodying the logos briefly in a moment of having this moment where he cuts himself off from the darkness that comes before and sees the world like Kella sees it. I just don't think he can hold on to that yet. That it's for him, it's a temporary, a passing state, you could say.
Wow. Yeah. That's great. I actually had jotted down other things this has come up over and over again, and maybe even in book 2. There's in italics, it's written often in the Nair POV. I'm forgetting something is happening over and over again. So to me, that really supports, I think, what you're saying. I wasn't even sure what it was. So I think I actually was thinking something totally different. So I may be embarrassed to say it.
How are you interpreting? Yeah, go for it.
So, okay, it's chapter 9, starts with, he awoke, more ancient. And I thought, this is a reference to the no God. And he's somehow channeling the no God. Because that, isn't that who, because we forget, isn't that what the Skavandi worship? Like, I keep thinking about that in the back of my mind. Like, so that was something I was like, maybe he's like the antithesis of, or the I don't know what the right terminology would be, but he's doing the no God version of the logos or something. Maybe that's what because he's also then like, he's basically, in league with the consult. So, but that's what I was thinking. I think your interpretation is also, like, I wouldn't disagree with it at all.
I mean, I don't like totally disagree with what you're saying either, because I think it's not like he's coming at this in the exact like Dunyain way, right? Like he's not being taught. Right. He's having this sort of, it's almost like through madness, he's finding a degree of enlightenment, really messed up enlightenment, but enlightenment nonetheless. Like he's learning things in his brokenness. And I mean, because it's just so, for the longest time, I was like, does he think Surway is, in quotes, Surway is Surway? And it's clear he doesn't. He knows she's not. Right. But at the same time, it's enough. And it, I think, highlights his perspective this entire time, which is that she's just an object to him. And so this Surway is Surway enough for him, because he never really cared about the soul of the woman. He never really cared who she was. it's this treasure, this prize for him. And so if it's a consult skin spy, whatever, I am curious what he is kind of planning. I mean, obviously he wants still to find Moingus and get back into things, but does he even have a plan, really? It's unclear. Like, how is he planning on developing his relationship with the consult? It's clear he doesn't really trust them. I mean, he's not an idiot, but he is going along with them. That whole storyline is, I wasn't sure where they were going to take Nair, and I'm so glad this is where it went. Like, this was the right path for his character. It's so interesting, especially with, as you mentioned, Mike, the history of the Skilvendi and their tie to the No God and the consult, that I just think this is such an interesting way of drawing parallels there, right, with history, but in a potentially very new way, right, that these cycles are finding new shape.
There's it's toward the I couldn't find it, but the last chapter we read, there is a reference to like different. It's either madness or genius, but something about him being possessed by the origin of madness could be, being possessed by the demonic, and that there's a lot of references to him kind of representing the god of war. I wrote down was the guy's name. Anyway, a lot going on here. just with Nair alone is like, wow.
It is interesting how so many of these characters view themselves like gods or compare themselves to gods or some sort of divine beings. Like you have Confis and all the Ikuris, right? That's kind of their basic belief system, is the emperor is like a god and must be worshipped like one. And then now obviously you have Kellis, who is in a semi-divine state, although he doesn't necessarily believe
Nair
that
doesn't
it's
actually
literally true, but that is
I
how
think
he is
Confis
projecting
might delude himself.
And then Nair, now you said, views himself as both a demon and a god of war.
I think Nair
there's a lot of overlap there potentially,
more
and
about himself.
Just it's an interesting,
I don't know,
continued thematic development there.
That's the most violent of all men, I think he called.
I don't know that if that is true now, I definitely don't think that was always true, because he had his whole saying of like, I am the what is it, like the killers of, I forget what he calls himself, but like he basically, the most violent of all men, right? That he like created this persona for himself because he was so filled with self-loathing that I think he is still to some degree grappling with, although he seems to be again kind of cutting himself off from it. That he definitely had deluded himself. I don't know. That's the thing with Nair, and that I struggle to pin down, is I feel like he's a paradox constantly, that he believes two things at once. In a way that like arguably arguably all people do that, but I feel like Nair is most clearly on the page, where like he simultaneously believes Surway is like, it's Surway enough, but also he knows it's not Surway, right? And in the same way, I feel like he views himself both as this like being, but also he thinks, it's all bullshit and none of that is meaningless. I don't know. I mean, that's just how I read him. That I feel like he's constantly holding these
interpreting quite a lot different in that,
and to me that's like representative
one
of madness, that he's,
you could argue that he's one of the most sane characters,
like he just views the world in a way that is,
because he's one of the characters, so I think, that most understands what's going on with him and what's going on in the world.
That he just believes all of these
paradoxes. If you think about it, he's one of the few characters
again, that's just my reading of
inward. He's like, he's trying to analyze himself. He's trying to understand how he's thinking, why he's speaking all these things. Everyone else projects outwards until Kellis makes them think about themselves, right? And what you said about Surway, I how I understand it is that he loved Serwi and he thought he considered her part of his tribe, and that also implies ownership because of their, how it is in their society. But he knows that fake Serwi is not real,
Right.
but he's willing to, how do I say, he's willing to accept the fakeness, and he's like, okay, I know it's fake, I'll just accept it. I know it's not real, but it's gonna heal me in some way. It is what I need, even though it's not what it's real. I know part of me can pretend that it's real. That's how I understand. Like, he knows himself, he knows his instincts, so he can coexist with both accepting things he knows is not true with half of his mind, but also just embracing his instincts, just like embracing his violence, embracing his culture in some cases, embracing all of these things. Hmm. But yeah,
I don't even disagree with that. I think that's, in some ways I was trying to say something very similar, which is that I think, again, like you're describing the sort of paradoxes that I think he's living, where like he knows Surway is not Surway, but he still like allows himself to live the delusion, so there's this simultaneous awareness, like he, and I would agree that he loves Surway, but not in a way that's like I think all the root of that feeling is Surway is just sort of his like his proof that he's not, the faggot reaper, right? That he's the big tough guy, that he's like, I don't think he like genuinely has romantic feelings for her. Not in any way that at least in my point of view of the world would identify as like sort of, not in the way like Akemi and Esmenet, for example, I feel about each other, right? To me, Surway, again, it embodies like an object. Like, she is literally a prize to him. She is this chalice that embodies this ideal, like this fantasy, which he's living now in the most literal sense, because it's not Surway, right? So again, I'm right there with you that I think like he is like you said, weirdly, like he's the most self-aware of anyone other than Kellis. But like I totally am with you on that. I do think he's crazy, but I think strangely his craziness is part of what lets him be self-aware, because it lets him, again, I think in the same way that his madness, he's so broken, he can actually break himself off even briefly from the darkness that comes before. It's like, it's this weird paradoxical state where he's just like so like destroyed as a person that he's actually wise, but he still isn't like functioning in a way that I view as like not in Kellis, where like Kellis to me has complete self-control, even if he's a monster, but he has control of himself. Generally, he's had like a couple, towards the end of the book too, where he like had his breaks, but they were fleeting moments. But Nair to me is like gaining more and more control, certainly from where he was in book one.
But I mean, can someone just
he still has a degree.
Everything is like once you've gone through it, can you really detach yourself, break down all the things that all the cultural norms, everything that makes you, I guess, sort of.
And I think part of it is embodied by the
without
fact
going crazy, without
he knows it's all
into
bullshit, but he
something.
keeps still living these like Skilvendi ideals. I think.
Yeah. But do you think once you're an adult already, do you think it's possible to go back to the level Kellis was?
I think that's the whole premise of the
Logos. He never had that
like I feel like that's sort of the
everyone
point
else
is that he continues to in some way let the past define him in a way that Kellis,
I don't know.
at least Kellis believes he does not. I think that's also up in the air, right? Is Kellis even fully cut off in the past, right? I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I don't know. It is an interesting question.
That would be a lot of unlearning
Yeah.
that you would have to do, and I think it would be. I think it would be very difficult. I think what's happening here is, you said, Dan, you said that he seems to be the most sane. In a way, he is,
Yeah.
but it's like, he's introspective, but he's also aware. He's like awakened in a way that is very unsettling to his nature as a Skilvendi barbarian, breaker of men with multiple wives and many children, and that past also is basically gone. So I think that I really like what your interpretation, Carl, and I don't know if like makes me think actually about myself, to be honest. Like because if if you've ever lived somewhere else, or I think a few of us on the call probably have lived in a different country, and you detach yourself from where you come from, and in a way, even your culture or whatever, I can totally relate in a way to what he's going through. But in this context, it is so much more extreme because he's also seeing the madness of Kellis that's going on and nobody else sees it. I think that's a big part of that, might be part of what really is, but also he's dealing with his own sexuality and so many other things at the same time. So it's quite a complex character, and I'm amazed that Baker is able to continue developing him in this way.
I agree. He's again just a character that I particularly by the end of book 2, I was like, I don't know where you take this character from here. Like, where does he go? I almost was like, at the point where Kellis considered killing him, I almost was like, that this would seem like a moment to write him out of the story. Like, I feel like his arc was done, but no, he still had so much room. Like, I got to give Baker credit. He's really just continued, like you said, Mike, finding new ways to develop Nair. It's really interesting.
Not to change the subject, but that there was a part where I thought he was going to be killed by Confess, and it's, I guess, I mean, it's still maybe, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not where they ended. I'd have to reread maybe the last few paragraphs again, but he had the realization that he was, Kellis supposedly had sent him to deal with Confess, but in reality, Nair realized that, oh yeah, I shouldn't take anything he says, and he wanted to be killed by Confess. So apparently Kellis knew what was going to happen. I don't know how he knew that, Confess was going to be emperor and escape and all. I mean, there's a lot that happens in terms of plot points. But yeah, so I wonder if Kellis wants something done, like, I guess it's probably, I don't know. I would be curious how Nair is able to thwart being killed. He was very close. So now that he's, again, like I said, in league with the consults, that must have been what he had decided. I don't think it was very clear to me per se, but he must have decided this is, I can survive this way by becoming, I didn't seem that way per se, but that is what ended up saving him from being, I guess, killed in the last chapter. Unless I totally read that wrong. What was your interpretation of that?
Your turn, Barsha.
Yep.
I honestly, the Nair sections, I felt very disoriented, and I think and after a point, I sort of just like let myself be disoriented rather than try to understand too much detail. But um, yeah, yeah, I think that it was interesting that Confess wanted to um was briefly considering trying to make him the, what is it now, exalt general of
Yeah.
the army. So I think these two characters are really interesting because they're both, well, I guess Confess never had any preconceived notions to fight with, and um what's his name, Nair, is wrestling with his own. And so those two characters together, placing them together, I think is really interesting what Baker did there. But yeah, back to the disorientation bit. I think writing wise, I think that's excellent because I felt as disoriented as Nair did. But also that also meant I didn't understand a whole lot of what was going on.
Yeah, the writing in there's POV gets very obtuse is maybe too harsh a word, but it's confused, right? And I think it's very intentional. It sometimes leaves me like rereading passages multiple times to make sure I'm like following what's going on here,
Yeah.
and certainly having to read very closely. And I think it's well done. I do think sometimes Baker, like Steven Erikson, actually goes a little too far in like being a little too unclear about what's exactly going on. But generally, I think it certainly adds, particularly with Nair, to the level of ambiguity. And yeah, I think the conflict, the inner conflict, and the, however you want to define it, whether it's madness or whatever, the storm inside Nair, it is quite tempestuous, and that definitely comes out on the page. I just want more Proyas. I miss the Proyas Nair buddy cop duo. That was probably the healthiest Nair was in all the books. He wasn't like,
I just said he's a very interesting
I don't know.
character.
Was he going around raping people then? Maybe he was. I don't know.
He was.
Yeah, never mind. He's always
yes.
a bad guy. Never mind. I don't know.
And I do like this part too,
He's a great
even though
character.
he's being
I seem to recall, Dan,
manhandled
did
a
you say
bit.
Proyas
I
was your
guess.
favorite character from
It's
this
still
trilogy?
very.
We haven't gotten
Yeah.
enough
I mean,
of
that's
him yet.
That was
Not
conflict.
yeah. Well, that's
Okay.
the
I thought
Yeah.
you said you like
where
Confess.
we're just
That was
Oh,
one of your
maybe.
favorite.
suddenly like Nair just
Your
hits
favorite
him.
character.
It's
Yeah.
so.
I mean,
mean, for me, it's so visceral. It's like. Because, like, you don't expect it. He didn't expect it. You don't expect it. He's just going to get hit.
That's a
Because you
nice way
just
to put
assume,
it.
like in our society,
Or
you
an
just assume
unfortunate
people
way
are
to
not
put
going to
it.
randomly come to you and hit you, right? And when if someone does, it's like, again, it breaks the whole, like, you can see there, he's also, his whole confidence is broken that, only that part, like, his confidence is gone. If you think about all the books, and even after that, he regains it because he takes control again. But for that moment, he truly feels powerless, and he feels fear, and he feels, I don't know, like, not admiration, but he's sort of like, he sees Nair as this bigger than him figure, while he always put himself above. I think it's just a very powerful scene, the whole one. And it's, yeah. But then he goes back to being himself, I guess.
I agree.
Hmm.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in the conversation with
Cute.
Nair
Eutas,
and
maybe?
Confess, when he's awakening him,
Cute.
he says, is that when he tells him, I wish it had been you, then I'd know for sure who led the, what is Kid? I forget where, but the battle where the Sylvandi and Confess, we meet them for the first time. And sorry?
I think it's. I
He
thought it
is.
was Cayuth
Key.
or
Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was that also rare moment of.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go so far as to call it vulnerability, but just doubt, I guess, in in
it's a
Cornfish,
very
and he wonders whether he
I
could
like
have
that scene because it
defeated
just shows how
the
fragile
Sylvandi
our
if Nair
societal
had been
constructs
leading them.
are,
So
right?
yeah,
But
that's
how
interesting.
easy they are to break if you just want to break them and you're not bound like
maybe we'll
Mayor,
almost think we'll
right? To all
see a
those
face
rules,
off
those
now
because
eventually.
if you think about it, like they
in
have
some
this
form.
what's it called, the Jian, right? Jian. Like everything is built this intricate network. Oh, I have to do these little things to manipulate people. But in reality, you could just violently break everything or kill someone, right? It's just how we build these very complex things, which are in reality just nothing. Yeah.
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 Absolutely. It's all a mirage, right? Yeah. It takes one
Might be
person
the
to
best
come in, and
but...
I mean, in real life, you can see that in the most horrible, violent ways, right? Like you talk about mass shooters or anything, just like someone, showing how fragile everything is. It's great stuff. Nair is a force of nature, certainly. Which, on a similar note,
that's his thing.
I will say, Kellis is too good at everything. The magic was like that was a step. He learned magic in like 2 weeks. That if I have one critique for this section, I was like that was a lot. That was it. It was just so fast. He's literally perfect at everything. And yeah, and at least he's like a bad guy, so it like adds to the tension rather than taking away from it. So it doesn't drive me like it doesn't really drive me nuts. And like you do get these great scenes, like when he does learn the magic and his eyes are glowing, and it's just like
what can stop him?
It's very
right?
cinematic.
What can stop? What is he trying to do?
I do have moments where I'm just like,
someone might try and stop him. That's the question,
is
right?
there anything this guy can't do? He's just absolutely. I mean, prodigy is the word, right? At everything, at like literally everything he's tried to do.
Well, I thought it was interesting that the consult was like, "Yeah, we're pulling for him. He's leading. He's headed to Shima. He's bringing the holy war, and that's what we want." I thought that was interesting. So they're like in his supporting him in that sense. Go ahead, Mark.
I mean, he is purging.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I did wonder why the consult would try to kill him, given
crusade,
that
right?
he is
and
continuing to take the war to Shima, and they did address that in this section. That the consul's like, we're letting them go. We're letting him have it for now
he reveals
because he's going where we want.
He's revealing the consult to everyone, which is the worst thing for the consult, right? Mm-hmm. But what they want is just to be in the shadows, I guess, and to let people think they don't exist.
Oh, that's also why. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, maybe as long as he's successfully bringing the holy war to Shime, they'll be okay with it.
You're right. I think I that might have been what the bird said to Nair or something. It's definitely came up where they said that we wanted him to go bring the holy war. But you're right. I mean, that's obvious. Yeah, he's revealing a lot of. Is he revealing all of them? I don't know.
What realize
at one point, I remember maybe in book 2, it was like, I've identified. I think it was like 20, but then only a few had been revealed. So part of me thinks maybe some of it is for show. I don't know.
That he's revealed people as consult who aren't consult?
No. No, go ahead. I was saying that. I was saying that, like, I'm just never convinced with anything in this book. So, like, I was thinking, like, maybe there's 50 consult spies, and Kellis sees all of them, but he only shows to the rest of the world that he's identified, a few of them, but because for all we know, because he can see the future, he can see what people's intentions are. Maybe he wants them for whatever his goals are to get.
What's happening at that time?
Moingus, he wants them to be around. But maybe I'm now going way off on a tangent here.
There was something I noticed in the second read I didn't notice the first time.
Yeah.
But on page 123 in my copy, that they noticed golden halos around Kellis's hands.
Yeah,
I saw that.
I think it's at the beginning of chapter 5. I don't think a whole lot was going on. I think they were just kind of observing Kellis, I think.
I think it's chapter 6, maybe.
Very peculiar.
Yeah. I assume you already mentioned it before, but it's very...
I remember
a lot of the stuff that's happening, isn't it?
And I was like, is this just like a prophet? Like they're just imagining it? They're drinking the Kool-Aid.
Is Kellis Jesus? Is he?
Akkamian, does he see them too?
I hope not. I hope Jesus was a nicer person than Kellis. I hope.
That's interesting. You point that out.
Yeah, I think he's... Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh. Well. Speaking of biblical, did anybody see a parallel?
Well, Esmenet, yeah.
Was it the son of Kelmomus?
Yeah.
Who has like all these different gospel around him? That was revealed, I think, when Esmenet was talking about when she was reading the sagas? Gosh, but I saw a parallel, somewhat of a parallel there with Kellis.
Yeah. To your point about Kellis learning things too fast, they seem to imply here that Kelmemonus, is that the name of the king who Akkamian keeps seeing die every time, who Esmenet was reading about, they seem to imply that he is talented, like he's smart and
it's been a while since
talented, like something of a prodigy himself. And maybe Anasurimbur are like that in general, and add Dunian abilities to that expands his ability to learn, perhaps. Like I remember highlighting the bit about that she reads in the sagas about the guy. But
spinning off from all of that we got an interesting, juicy little tidbit that probably doesn't matter for at least this trilogy, but maybe doesn't matter at all. Although actually could potentially matter a lot. Talking about that Anasurimbur line, there was the implication that Seswatha was the father of Kelmomus's kid.
Oh, really? Where? What?
When Esmenet was reading the sagas, was it when she was reading the sagas, or was someone else talking? I don't know, but there was at some point there was mentioned the idea that Seswatha and Kelmomus had a falling out, and they did not reunite until the apocalypse, and to fight off the No God. And the big reason for it proposed was that it was over his relationship with the son, the prince, because there were some rumors that Kelmomus' favorite lover had in fact coupled with Seswatha, and that the prince was Seswatha's son. This is like a throwaway. There was like one line about it, but it did stand out to me because I was like, ooh, that is juicy. That is interesting. And it's extra meaningful.
But I don't think that's
because if
genetic,
everyone
right?
is ascended, I
like,
mean, I don't know. Is it descended from that son?
well,
the family tree
like
is a
a
little
king,
unclear to me.
a
But
king
if it
and
is,
family was not
Tellus isn't even an Asuring board,
magicians.
not by blood.
Well, maybe we haven't done that part yet.
Interesting. Well, he is one of the
Have we? I don't remember.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not genetic. Oh, you're just born that way. Oh, really? I didn't know that. I think this character's name is now Coyote, and I find that difficult to pronounce. But
yeah, I can't. I was having trouble even just remembering it because of that. Yeah, it is interesting, and they snuck in. I mean, all of that stuff in the sagas. It's interesting what we all learned there. I love that stuff. Getting the ancient history, they snuck into Golgotha. Crazy. I want to know. I want to read the sagas now. Like, give me the sagas. I want to know what the hell happened.
I like it too. I think I used the word information dump, and I think that's the wrong terminology because I do like it, and I hate to say it. I started reading the encyclopedic glossary of it. I'm admitting
I think parts of it are information dumps. Like we get like pages of it, but it's so compelling and interesting that like, who cares? And that goes to show, right? Like info dump, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? Especially when it like, it does matter. Again, especially if like, we're talking about, a throwaway line, but potentially the whole Onasuring board line is, bloodline is false, right? Like that's interesting. Yeah. That's juicy material.
Speaking of, I always, on my first read, I always loved these descriptions of the arc of the skies.
What did they describe like 2 golden horns? Does anyone have any idea what that actually like looks like? I could not picture like what is it literally just like 2 parts of it that just like extend out, kind of like I wasn't sure, like, am I supposed to be picturing like wings? Like what is?
I was imagining that it was like the maybe if it was a spaceship or whatever, that the rest of it might have been buried. That was what was
definitely. Oh yeah,
that's what was
technically none of it is official. Also, so
the Earth, but
that makes.
Well, there's going to be descriptions in the future books.
Oh, no, I was going to say there is artwork out there that you can see the horns, but I would probably stay away if you don't want it. Because you'll probably find maps and things. So I
can't do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Can't do it.
Oh. Yeah, but
to help picture, yeah. That's cool. I'm definitely going to try to be very careful about artwork. Luckily, I got away with it at the end of the Warrior Prophet.
I mean, it's the name of one of the books. So.
But I spoiled so many things in Malazan for myself by looking up fan art. They're just like right there blatantly. So I'm going to be careful.
Oh.
Don't want to do that to myself again.
I mean, the other thing that I know is a future book that came up is The Ordeal. But maybe that's a different, but they don't say the Great Ordeal. They say The Ordeal, I think. And that's Kelmomis's holy war against Golgotha. And I didn't understand, how is that a holy war? But maybe
the no god.
Well, we're gonna get to it, I think.
So the Golgotha is like the stronghold of the Inquiry, who then
the place, we don't
Mengeka, who later become the consult. So how are they like religion? That's the part I didn't understand. I also could have maybe completely botched that, but I think that's the way I understood it. Okay.
Is Golgotha a place or a being?
You say, I need to report back to that city. We're just talking about people there, right?
It's a city.
Because the crow person thinks something to himself that it sounded like he thought Golgotha was someone he needed to report to, but maybe it's someone there that he needs to.
Yeah.
Mm, makes sense.
Yeah.
The Nair compared the task, sorry, the faces, the consult faces, to tusk, to the tusk. There was a whole sentence there. Do you think that has some origin story of the tusk somehow? I'm trying to find it, but I think it was in chapter 9 when he's thinking about the faceless ones, and then he says, like the tusk. Mm.
Hmm. I think I
Oh,
remember
yeah,
that. Yeah.
tusks. Yeah, thorns, tusks. They were spears concealed in the thickets of human activity. Thorns, tusks.
That washed right over me. No, I didn't. Although you are reminding me not to jump away because it's tied to this. Bro, this dude
It's very
straight up
open.
kissed
It's
the
just
thing when it
very,
opened its
accepting.
face.
Yeah.
That was that.
Yeah.
There are no words. There are no
Nope.
words.
Okay.
A lot.
Disgusting doesn't even come close. That was unreal.
So
He just went all in French kiss that alien mutant. Oh
that's his
yeah,
prize, you know.
exactly.
He's very attached to Serway. I thought, and again, so I've definitely shared things where I'm like, what happened before? I don't know what the hell's going on. I thought that he had a face hugger. I thought that Nair then got a new face attached to him.
Right?
Did anybody else think that or no?
So I had moments of confusion where I thought Nair is also like concept, kind of like Sarcellus a little bit, almost like that. Um, but not quite, because he still has awareness of himself. Like the thing called Sarcellus only thought of himself as a thing called Sarcellus. This feels like he's been possessed by the consult, especially that scene with Confess, when later he doesn't remember. He thinks to himself, apparently he had been beaten up last night, but he doesn't remember that he was the one who did the beating. uh yeah, that felt
Yeah.
like something's going on there with like, at first I thought maybe he's been replaced by consult and we're not made aware of that yet, but then there's too much of Nair in the thoughts, in the monologues, that for it to be consult. Maybe it's just possession, some kind of possession. I don't know.
I thought that when after he kissed the whatever the thing, it said something about he could feel its muscles beneath twitching beneath his skin. Anyway, I thought nobody say.
Yeah.
I was confused. I thought I thought maybe it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something, and they're taking his
Maybe they got some of his DNA some other
whatever,
way.
so that they can imprint and then make a copy of him.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I thought might be going on. I don't know.
Or
But
some
if they
hair or
needed that, then
whatever.
one of the consult would have had to kiss Kellis, no? And they
Good point.
didn't, as far as we know. That's true.
Okay.
Grab the cup of water he drank. Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that there was some kind of initiation or something maybe going on.
Mm,
Who knows? We'll find out. That was at the end
yeah.
of the last chapter, so we don't know. I didn't read ahead.
So, about sort of new topic, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go for it.
About the fact that Nair is dropping away a lot of his preconceptions, right? Esmenet is also grappling, or like sort of redoing her worldviews. There's a line about how she's rewriting Nyan, and it. I think those are two interesting uh, people that Kellis has affected, except Esmenet it's less consciously than with Nair. Esmenet is a lot more accepting of the societal changes that Kellis is bringing about because I guess she stands to benefit from them. But Nair has to force
I
himself
think
to
Nair
rethink things that
wants
are
to
deeply
accept
ingrained. Like they both
his
are
society.
rethinking things that are
I
deeply
feel he
ingrained
wants
in
to
their
accept
psyche,
Patricia's
but
side, but
Esmenet
now
is
that
far
he
more
has seen
accepting
more,
because
he's
it suits
having
her. But
harder
Nair,
time doing it.
maybe ultimately it would suit him, but he doesn't know that yet. So he's struggling with it a lot more. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, he wants yeah, I guess Esmenet didn't like being a part of the society that she was in. Nair wants to be a part of the society, and they both get the opposite. Yeah, like I mean Esmenet kind of
Returning.
gets what she wants. Nair doesn't.
I agree with that.
Returning?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a really good insight. I don't think Nair has anywhere to go, you know. I don't think, which is why maybe he's turning to the dark side or what have you.
Yeah,
Turn
I
to.
don't how much of what sorry returning.
Oh, okay.
Oh, interesting. How much of what Nair is doing now is conscious? I feel like he's just sort of riding the waves at the moment, going where the consult is taking him because he doesn't almost like he doesn't want to think or doesn't want to deal with himself. So he's like, yeah, these guys are taking me somewhere. I'll go with them. I don't feel like he's consciously planning anything or doing none of the things he's doing are because he wants to. It's more that like things are just happening to him and he's taking micro decisions in the moment, but don't feel like he's doing any long-term planning or making any long-term decisions. It's just like, oh, I'm being taken away by the consult, cool, I'll go with them. Oh, survey's protecting me, like, oh, survey's here to kiss me, cool, I'll or here, let me beat Confus up. And yeah.
I think at the very end of the section we just read that's true, but I think when he's with Confus, he's certainly actively thinking and planning about how to deal with Confus and how to deal with Kellis. I mean, I'm not convinced he isn't making plans. Like, I think that's still up in the air, just from my point of view of it. But I'm really unclear of if he is planning what he's planning. And so I do feel, I mean, he's definitely along for the ride to some sense, right? I mean, just fundamentally, he's not like struggling against the consult. He's going along with them. And so, now that he's on the run, he's sort of just like, all right, we're going. Yeah, I don't know if he's planning. We'll see. I think that will become clear in the coming chapters. But I do think when he was in the city, he was Jokta. He was actively, even if it wasn't long term.
I feel like
he
he's trying to find
where he thinks about
where
how
he
Kellis is
belongs
thinking
now.
past Shime.
He doesn't belong anywhere. I feel like he doesn't
imagine a world past Shime,
with anyone, with any part of society. Like what
devoured every.
I don't know. He doesn't know what he wants.
That's like the end of the world to him.
What his role is, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess he can't go back home. And yeah.
Honestly, if he really wants to live out that Scovindi life, going with the consult ain't a bad idea. They're kind of about similar things, so there are worse places for him to go.
They worship the same gods, no?
Right.
But I feel like now he's having trouble with that
and
because like
killing
he could
people
go
and
back, but
raping
he
and
knows where
being
like
just
how
the worst.
restrictive
So,
it is. I guess it would be.
you know, if
like
he's
he
following
would
his
have
heart's
to put
desire, like
himself somewhat into the
can't argue with that.
cage of
Exactly.
Kobe
Heart
tradition,
desires to be just the worst.
right? And now
Similar
he's having
values.
trouble fitting in
I
it.
agree.
Probably. I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he is.
Well, I feel
unsure
like
of where
he started
fits.
feeling
He
that way
doesn't
because
think
of
that, but I
Moangus,
think
right?
he is
Because
very
before
like
Moangus
I
sort
think
of
that's what he's
unlocked
feeling.
him, I guess.
You know, like he doesn't know where he fits in, and to some
Maybe
degree, I
that's
think
why he
arguably
has-
that's what he's
he
always
has to
felt.
kill
He
him.
just wasn't aware of it. That like he didn't fit into Skilvindi culture. He just wasn't really sure. You know what else.
It will
there
will
was
lock
for
him back in his society, maybe.
Right. No, totally. Definitely.
Yeah.
And that'll help.
But maybe that's what he thinks. He thinks
Yep,
when he can kill
that's what will
Moangus,
happen.
he can go back because Moangus is the thing that
Not the sense of
destroyed
despair
his.
that comes after getting what
Right.
you want, and then what the hell do I do with my life now?
He would have no idea. Like the dog that catches its own tail, he would have no idea. I just can't imagine. He's not prepared to actually deal with Moingus. Not at all.
Okay. Maybe Moangus dies before he
totally
can get there.
Yeah, like that's the for him the sort of reset button, right? But nah, he no chance. I mean, I do think that he's lived this long, he will get to meet Moingus. Like that's a prediction I feel comfortable making, that they will have a confrontation one way or another. I would be shocked at this point if they don't. That would be insane if Moingus is already dead and they show up and it's the biggest anticlimax. Like he's not even been around. He's just that would be I can't even imagine.
It could be a skin spot.
I would be so mad, honestly, if Moingus is dead. Like someone's got to talk to him. I just want to see Moingus once. Like he doesn't have to live for long. I just want to see one scene with Moingus.
One thing, yeah. Maybe we have seen several, and Moingus is Maithanet.
Right, exactly. Or there's that, right? We know Maithanet's coming. What is Maithanet's deal? I don't know.
We don't know.
That's still a question mark. I'm actually surprised. I did not think it was going to take this long to unveil the mystery of Maithanet, but it's like going to be like the end of the book before we, figure out what his secret is.
A lot.
Yeah, speaking of, I feel like these chapters started a lot of threads. I mean, they're connected to the larger story, sure, but I feel like they also started new things that I'm like, we're halfway through the last book. I'm curious where this is going or how much we leave off for the next series.
What specifically are you talking about? Because I think definitely there are a lot of ideas, particularly in like the backstory of the world and things like that. And obviously we're not going to deal with all the consult stuff, but I just feel like, Nair and Confis, the storyline there feels like it's a continuation. Certainly it's veered in ways I didn't expect, but that is a continuation. Kellis has finally learned magic, which seemed inevitable. And Akemi and Esmenet's relationship has continued to develop in ways that are, I feel like are like, again, unexpected in some ways, but are stepping stones that do feel like they've been laid out, I guess.
Oh, I agree that everything's like cohesive and feels like part of the story that's already been going on. It's more that wrapping up and bringing all these things to an end point feels like a tall order for the last 200 pages of the trilogy. So, like, we've had everyone go off to different places, right? Nair is going to that new spaceship thing, I guess, and what's his name, Confis is, I guess he's going to try and take over the Holy War again, so maybe there'll be some convergence there. But yeah,
That's the word, right?
Yeah,
Lazim fans, that's the word. We're definitely going for a big convergence at Shime, which is what we were promised right at the opening, and I think Baker's going to pay it off. Which I got to get. I mean, that's like basic structural thing, right? That like, you know, you make a promise you're going to go to this place, like everything needs to end up at that place, and I am excited. You know, it's like it's Mordor and Lord of the Rings, right? I'm excited to see the payoff there.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
I think it is going to be that convergence, right? Where like literally all the characters are going to come together. I mean, even Maithanet left Rome. He's coming out here, you know, like we're going to get them all. And I think that's the way Baker will stick the landing. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here because I'm with you. Like there is a lot to resolve in 200 pages. Like if this book was 400 more pages rather than 200, I would be like, yeah, that's reasonable.
You know, we definitely haven't gotten to the climax of this book.
Yeah,
for sure. So
it is. Yeah, I feel like, I mean, if I could use an analogy, I feel like we're still climbing. We're not, like, we haven't started the descent yet. And
right.
I would have expected to start descending by now, but
the action is still rising.
Mm-hmm.
I feel in a lot of ways still.
Yeah.
I will say I looked ahead while we were reading. We get to Shime in these chapters. The next chapters we're going to read, so I'm ready. It's we're going to start it. I guarantee Shime, that's where it turns.
Sure.
I'm ready.
Do you think we find out what Maithanet's deal is in these chapters or the ones after that?
I would be shocked if it's in the literal last 100 pages because I feel like you need a lot of time to deal with the ramifications. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, you know, but that would really shock me is if we get to the end of the next 100 pages and we don't have the majority of answers. Like, I'm sure there will still be some secrets, but obviously there are plenty of secrets for the next series, but I just mean like kind of the main stuff, like what's Maithanet's deal and like where's Moingus and that sort of thing. I would be shocked if we don't figure that out pretty quickly in Shime.
Yeah.
Because it just, you know, if not the first chapter, then the second chapter in Shime.
That's okay. Yeah.
That's just my guess. I mean, I don't know.
No, that makes sense. I'm kind of like wanting for that to happen. I don't have any evidence to say that this is what will happen. Like maybe that is the climax that they all meet there because, well, I guess they have to deal with the son of the Padi Raja that they killed. Which, by the way, Padi Raja is like hilarious, the name. Because, I mean, so I think I've been reading Dune, so I kind of think I know what Baker tried to do because Padishah, he took that, and then Raja means king, so he probably did the thing where he took the Padishah and then did Padi Raja out of that. But as far as I know, that's not a word in any of the Indian languages, and Padishah is just, you could say, a modification of the word Badshah. And maybe some languages write it as Padishah, but Padi Raja, the only translation I can think of is half king.
Arabic or some, or Persian, maybe. Because I think there is
I read it like that. I read
India
it, I don't know if he based it on any actual
sort of
word in a language, but for me,
no, I think
in
you're
my
right.
mother tongue, Padi Raja is half a king.
I think. Just like Zoom
so
is the Zoom or whatever you pronounce it is the sort of Africa equivalent, I guess.
Maybe. But which have you been there yet? Oh,
I thought so too. Yeah.
I was thinking about the Pasha, right? The Ottoman Pasha.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is Persian, but it's
right.
what I think he
when I was reading.
Well, I mean, but I think Raja. I think you might be right that he's mixing the words.
Right.
Parsha, because I hadn't even made that connection. But you're totally right. It's the Padishah emperor thing, right? Like and Padishah, like Frank Herbert didn't.
Pasha. Yeah.
True.
Yeah, so that's where Dune got it from, probably, right? But Baker probably got it from Dune, and then he changed the Shah
How is it
to
spelled?
Raja.
Spelled
I totally agree with you, Yusha. I think that the
P-A-D-R-I-S-H-A?
etymology there is he's bending. I mean, the same way you look at like Game of Thrones, right? And you have
The one in
Cal,
Elwa.
and that's just Khan,
Mm.
right? Like Khal Drogo is just,
Mm.
he's the Genghis Khan character, right? Like
R.
Yeah.
A.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which are you asking for, the real word or the one in Irwa? It's Padirajaah. I think I said that right.
So, are there any other topics before we start doing quotes?
We need our quotes. I need my hit.
Yes, Steve.
Very true.
Is that my cue or what?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. On page 132, the estranged always resorted to talk of third parties.
Mm.
On page 162, one I really like a lot, that hope is little more than the premonition of regret. This is the first lesson of history.
Yeah, I like that one.
164, where hope burns bright, patience is quickly consumed.
Yes.
And 192, when the trials of the world broke men, the outside leaked into the world. Those are my favorites.
Good quote.
Nice.
I got one, but I don't know what page it is.
Mm-hmm.
There were two paths. Nair understood that now. There was the past that men remembered, and there was the past that determined, and rarely, if ever, were they the same. All men stood in thrall of the latter.
Nice.
And knowing this made them insane.
I like that. Yeah, I have that underlined, that one. And I think that's what Carl was referring to earlier with the whole...
That was one of the passages.
Yeah.
So page 119, the epigraph, history, logic,
maybe it's because
these
both
all should be taught
subjects
by slaves.
don't require
you don't have any idea what
input
that's
from
saying.
the teacher.
Like, I don't. I mean, I understand in the most literal sense. Like, that's very little. It's very straightforward. But I don't understand
knowledge or experiences or something like that. So a slave can teach them because there's no value, but the slave
should be taught by slaves.
needs to
what is this? I mean, the author's
bring
anonymous
these topics
too,
to life. I guess maybe.
What does that mean?
He just needs to repeat what other people smarter than him taught him before.
I get what you're saying.
I'd agree with you for logic and arithmetic, but history seems like a very dangerous, quote unquote, dangerous thing to ask a slave to teach.
Yeah. I also history, that is a big one for a slave to teach, right? That's
Because if slaves taught history, maybe there wouldn't be any slaves.
Oh damn. Getting real.
Your past self may not recognize you. Oh. Don't remember what that note was about. I had this underlined, like, it's not a quotable quote, but I think this was important. And he realized that he would gladly die for Anasurumbor Kellis. He would begrudge no sacrifice despite his unrequited love.
Well, he doesn't want to see it, even if it was
that is terrifying.
real, right? Because he is what he's been waiting for,
Akamian, Nair, yes, but Akamian, someone like Akamian, you really want him to look into at least some of the manipulation that Kellis is doing willfully, but it seems that he has no clue.
He's blind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. He has that moment of, I want to call it awareness, when Kellis asks him, "Hey, did you ever try it with two unutterables or whatever that was?" when he's teaching him the gnosis. And Akamian does not tell him about the long lasting debate, because the thought he has is he gave someone belladonna. He didn't actually do the killing, but 3 people died anyway. All he had to do was pass along some poison, and he's terrified of what this would do in Kellis's hands. So it seems that he's starting, at least he has some realization of what could be wrought with it,
Maybe.
if like by Kellis, but
I don't know. It takes a while to
I don't know, is he
realize.
not
but,
giving
yeah.
in to the full extent of that
Probably
thought,
that
or
he's a
was
prophet
that
or
just a
something,
passing thought
right?
that no one should
It's not
have
easy
this
for him
knowledge?
to.
Maybe that's
Like
what it
he's
is.
testing him all. He was testing him all the way,
He's certain
right?
that
At
Kellis
every
will figure
step,
it
he
out,
was
but
sort of
no
like,
one
prove me
really
wrong,
should.
or prove me right. Like I need some
Maybe.
way that you need to convince me to, overcome my reluctance. Because he wanted, but he wants him to prove that he's the prophet, right?
Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
I think wasn't it mentioned
Do you
about
think
Inrao that he could leave
Kellis
because he
once
hadn't started seeing the dreams
is
or something,
the dreams
right?
that the mandate schoolmen have, is that a product of learning the gnosis, or is that something that
I
is
think some introductory,
bequeathed
so
to
maybe
them as a
not the
gift?
actual
Like,
gnosis,
here, you've
but
graduated.
maybe,
Now you
because
can have
he used
nightmares
some
every
magic,
night.
right? But not fully. So maybe there's some leap you need to do that brings you to a different level, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Had he been taught the gnosis, or mm, yeah.
I
I'd
mean,
be
he wouldn't be afraid, I guess. So what is he gonna do with them?
yeah. I'd be very curious what the dreams look like in
Yeah, I guess because
Kellis's
people, when they're there, they
brain.
feel what
If they
Sessuad is feeling,
become
right? They're
darkness
not
that
in
he needs to
control
fight.
of. Yeah, so I wonder
That's
how
a great
he would
point. Now that
react to
Seth
not
Watt is
being
in
in
his head.
control.
Mm. Or would it change him? Would
Yeah.
mm.
Mm.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I have this one marked, though I don't think I know what it means. Love was never so simple as the marks with which it was written. Like, I mean, I kind of got it from the context around it, but the line in and of itself, I thought it was pretty, at least, if not something I fully understood.
Nice.
Cool. That seems like a good place to call it. Any other any other things that we should discuss? No. Okay, let's do outros. Steve, would you like to start us off?
Sure. You can find me on pagechewing.com. I'll be quick like Dan.
Carl, we'll go clockwise.
Oh, yes. And you can also find me on pagechewing.com or on a lot of social media at Carl D. Albert.
Yeah, you can also find me.
And you can find me
like
at
Page
GFR17
Chewing,
on
and
page 24.
if you're so inclined, please tune in to the Page Chewing comics and manga. Steve and I regularly talk about our picks of the week, so check that out.
Cycle, creating some cycles there.
I know.
And you can find me on the Patreon forum as well, or on my YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain. And I'll also plug our new sci-fi podcast called Speculative Speculations. The episodes have been coming out on Spotify in the last couple of weeks. We'll also start putting them out on YouTube in the next week or so. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see everyone in about a week with the next set of chapters. Bye.